Welcome to Conscious Chronicles. Today's near-death experience is that of Dr. Lynda Cramer. In May 2001, Lynda Cramer died, clinically pronounced dead for over 40 minutes. She went to heaven for 5 years. Her book, entitled 5 Years in Heaven, is a 369-page testimony of her near-death experience, documenting where she went, what she saw, what she learned, all whilst in heaven. She describes in detail her life review, life lessons taught by her great-grandmother. She is shown what her life lessons are and discusses options of reincarnation. With kind permission, granted by Lynda Cramer herself, I will narrate some passages from her book, 5 Years in Heaven, of which I will be sure to leave a link in the description below. I remember the beginning of May 2001 extremely vividly. I was suffering from a cold that had gone onto my chest. I had medications that I had brought to America with me, and I was taking them, and I honestly thought they would be sufficient. On the 6th of May 2001, I remember lying in bed watching television. It must have been about 10 p.m. when I went to sleep. The next thing I know, it is dark, and I wake up, really struggling to breathe. I remember I was desperate to go to the toilet, but I couldn't get out of bed. You know, I didn't expect this part to be so hard for me to write down. How do you write down your own death and describe the intimacy of it to others? Yet, it is an intimacy, because it is something that is really private. You just don't want others to know about it. You don't want the embarrassment of describing the worst thing that ever happened to you. But in this case, I do need others to know. I need others to know that there is hope, and that there is something else that is out there. Turning off the light bulb isn't the end of it. It's just the start of it. So, with that in mind, I need to keep telling this part, even though, to me, this part is really hurting. It was like so many other times before, when I had been sick, and then I got better. You know, like when you get a head cold? You get sick, and then, a few days later, you get better. Well, this time was exactly like that. It was nothing out of the usual. It was nothing that had alarm bells or some sort of siren going off in my head, letting me know what was about to happen to me. It was normal, just like so many other times when I would get sick in life. And that, to me, is what is so frightening here. That is what makes this part so hard for me to write about. Anyway, I woke up at approximately 2 a.m. I was struggling to breathe. I remember getting out of bed, and the only thought I could fathom was how badly I needed to go to the toilet. Why didn't I call an ambulance? Well, to be honest, I didn't think I was that sick. All I know is that I wanted to go to the toilet. You hear people talking about what the last thing they would do on this earth would be, and how they would spend their last moments, and what they would think about. Some people say that they would think about their loved ones, or the things they wished they could have done if they had their time over again. Well, folks, sorry to disillusion you all a bit, but nothing like that went through my mind at all. In fact, all I could think about was getting to the toilet. I managed to get myself to the toilet. I closed my eyes, and at this point, I fell asleep. It was, in hindsight, just like falling asleep at any other time. I was comfortable, really tired, and did not think of much at all. I just drifted off into what we would all consider to be sleep. My husband woke up. He came into the toilet and found me on the floor, not breathing, and my skin was blue. He ran back out to get the phone. As he dialed 911, he turned and rechecked my pulse. I did not have a pulse. He stated that due to finding me lifeless and blue, he could not ascertain how long I had been clinically dead at this time. He then stated that under the directions of the 911 operator, he commenced CPR on me, and he continued working on me until the basic life support paramedic crew arrived. He further explained to me that whilst doing CPR on me, he must have pressed too deeply, as he heard cracks, which resulted in 2 broken ribs. He stated to me that it was over 10 minutes, possibly 15 minutes, for the first emergency crew to arrive. After working on me for 15 minutes, a second paramedic crew arrived. The advanced life support crew came approximately 15 minutes after the basic life support crew. They advised him that they wanted to cut a hole in my neck to allow oxygen to get into my lungs. But he refused that treatment. So, therefore, I was intubated. In all, he stated, the emergency crews were inside the house for 45 minutes. This was verified by my medical files that I have received from the hospital. The ambulance transported me to the hospital, where I was admitted to the intensive care unit. I was in a coma, and I stayed on artificial life support for a few days. During this time, I suffered 2 events where I flatlined again, and I had to have restraints tied around my legs and wrists as a precaution, which is also verified in my medical records. Lynda goes on to explain that her experience was so different from that of her husband. She says that she can clearly remember, even after all these years, that she was on the toilet, going to sleep. And then, instantaneously, she was in the living room, floating up near the ceiling, in the corner of the room. I did not, at any time, question why I was now situated in the living room. I did not have the debate within my own thoughts, where I suggested to myself that I should go back into the toilet area and observe my own body. It simply did not enter my head to judge why I was now in the living room. I also never questioned how I had just appeared there without physically moving. All these thoughts were so meaningless that I did not need to question what was now happening to me. So, the first thing I need to explain here is the term I am using, called floating. I need for you to understand that I was floating, because my body was now not on the ground with gravity. We think of the word floating like in water, but what happened to me here was not like that sort of floating. When a person floats in water, they feel the gravitational pull. They wave their arms around in the water so they do not sink. You feel a sort of weight when you are in water, preventing you from moving as freely as when you are not in water. This experience was totally different. There was no gravity. I had no heaviness or forces around me preventing me from staying down, which is what happens with gravity. It is so hard to explain. I was just being there, in the air, above the ground. No gravity. I also did not have to control my balance at any time during this period. If you observe people in anti-gravitational rooms, they still need to wave their hands around to stabilize their position off the ground. I did not need to do that. It was like standing on the ground, balanced and in control, yet my feet were not on the ground. There was no space between my feet and the ground. Therefore, I had no sense of vertigo whilst there. So, there I was. And the first thing I thought of was that I was standing on the couch that was in the corner. So, I looked down, and I found that I was actually about 2 feet above the seat on the couch. And I had no feet. In fact, my legs, after my knees, just sort of dissolved into nothing towards my ankles. This, in hindsight, should have scared me. But I wasn't scared at all. And to be honest, It was like it was normal to be floating in the corner of the room. I found it usual, if you can call it that. It felt like something I was used to doing all the time. Was I breathing? I honestly don't think I was, because I don't remember my chest heaving with a breath at all. I was just being there, floating in the corner. Where I was, my head was only inches from the ceiling. The ceiling was a 12-foot ceiling, and my physical body is 5 foot 7 inches. So, I was about 6.5 feet higher than if my feet had been on the ground. Another thing that was very prominent was that I knew I had no physical body at this time. I actually did not care that I was not breathing, for breathing was unnatural at this point. I had no aches, no muscle feeling, or any other sensations that would suggest I had a body, and it all appeared normal. Where I was didn't concern me at all. In fact, I was more concerned with all the people coming through the front door into the living room. It wasn't a concern based on fear, suspense, or anything negative. It was more of a concern based on not knowing who these people were that were now entering my house. They didn't even see me, yet they were talking about me as they walked straight past me. They went through the door to my right, which led into the bedroom with the bathroom where my body was. Oddly, I was not worried. It didn't even bother me that these two unknown strangers, now coming into my house, did not acknowledge that I was there, floating in the corner, right in front of them. It was then that I realized that my physical body was in the toilet area. Being alone whilst floating in the living room, I could hear the muted voices of the three males coming from the toilet area where my body was. I could hear their soft and calm tones as they discussed something, which seemed foreign to me at this time. I have to state here that I was totally distanced from the situation that these three men were experiencing. I knew it was nothing to do with me, because the me that I was not the me in the toilet with the three men. I was totally unassociated with what was going on in the other room. I did not care at all about what was going on, because it did not concern me at all. I am guessing here, by the official medical records, that it was about 10 to 15 minutes later when another paramedic crew arrived. And I saw these men walk into the house and hurriedly walk through the living room, past me, and enter the bedroom, towards where my body was. Next, through the front door, came two other people in a totally different uniform, and one was a police officer. They came into the living room and were having a discussion about me and some other things about the house. There were now 6 strange people in the house, not including my husband. I was looking down on them. I was much higher than they were, and I had a panoramic view of them all, from up near the ceiling. I tried to talk to my husband, to let him know that I was there, to let any of them know that I was there. But I could not talk. All I could do was think the words, but there was no urgency at all in wanting to talk to them. I just wanted to be polite and to talk to them. I was never scared, never frightened, never had any sort of negative feelings at all. I was just floating there, just going along with whatever these strangers and my husband were talking about. I was standing. I could feel the energy produced by the floor, extending out of the floor, attaching itself to me, then entering into my feet. I did not move at all from where I found myself when I entered this building. I was just standing there. And after a while of looking at the architecture of this building, I looked out in front of me, and I saw the big 3. There is no other way to describe these 3 beings, but to call them the big 3. I did not initially see them, even though they were right in front of me at the other end of the cathedral. I was too enthralled by the majesty and beauty of this building, totally absorbed by the architecture I was observing. Some call them the Ancient Ones or the High Council, but considering these beings did not officially introduce themselves to me, I am in no way going to assume them to be the Ancient Ones or representatives of some sort of council. Therefore, I will keep calling them the Big Three. They were in front of me, at the front of this magnificent room where I found myself. They had no physical form. However, I could clearly see what I interpreted to be a head and shoulders. There were no facial features, no clothing, and above all, nothing to let me know whether these beings were human or from some other place. Like the blue orbs that I mentioned earlier, the middle being of the three was the tallest. I would say this being was about 12 feet tall. The other two on either side were about 10 feet tall. Where their heads were, it was like looking into a dimensional trance of energy. The energy emitted from these beings' heads radiated down their bodies to their chests, or where their chests would be. At the same time, this energy also traveled up from the chest area to the head area. It appeared to me like a waterfall of energy, traveling both up and down simultaneously, but ultimately swirling like a whirlwind of energy around and in their head areas. It was the same bright light that I had seen in the orbs, but again, it was not blinding. Instead, it was inviting. The three beings knew everything because they were everything. They had their own intelligence, and it was pure energy. There was no definitive end to the light that they were, and the room around them was connected to them through the energy they all emitted. They interlined and were connected to the room. They were the room, one with everything around them. I was standing there in front of these gigantic beings in total shock. I had no idea who these beings were, but I was not scared at all by their presence. In fact, I was overcome with love. At this point, the love emitted from my chest like a rainbow. It filled my very core and radiated out of me. It was constant and moving at the same time. The Big Three did not talk to me at all straight away. There was no need to. I got a full understanding. It was like a knowing, if you can call it that. I knew exactly why I was there and what I had to do. It is strange to write in descriptive words what I was feeling at this point, but all I can say is that I had a total understanding, a clear visualization, or if you want to call it, the knowing of everything. Had I ever stood in this place before? Had I experienced other lives where I had died and now stood here, about to undertake my life review? I do not know, for I had no memory or cognitive awareness of being there before. But it was familiar, like returning to a place from our childhood. That sort of familiar, but with no recollection at all of what happened, if I had even been there at all. Everything was calm at this point. Furthermore, there was no noise at all. It was total quiet. I was standing there in front of these beings with no noise, no external voices of people outside. In front of the Big Three, I saw something on the ground. It was not a box, but the only way I can describe it is to call it a box. This box released its own energy, emitting outwards and upwards, downwards and backwards, all at the same time. So there I was, in this massive room, looking at massive beings, and looking at this box-type thing on the floor in front of them. Then, one of the three spoke. The voice was the most engaging, attractive voice I had ever heard. It showed a compassion and love that I had never heard anyone else ever speak in. This type of tone, when this being spoke, it was a magical entrancement of words that hit me to my very core. A totally compassionate and emphatic voice. The first thing they said was, "Are you prepared?" There were no mouth movements. It was all telepathic. I heard these words all within my own being. At this time, I knew they were not my own thoughts, as the masculine tones all suggested to me that these beings were masculine energies, yet I have no definite proof that they were masculine. I then said, yes, and at that point, I realized that I was also speaking telepathically. It was as natural as talking here on Earth. However, there was no physical attempt made at all to talk. It just came naturally. Then, the box opened. I did not open the box. These beings didn't open it. It just opened by itself, like on cue. Did this box also have its own consciousness or its own perception? I'm guessing so. For it opened on its own merits without any external body opening the lid. Remember, here, everything in this place was one with each other. Everything was connected and had its own consciousness. Every single thing knew the intention of every other thing in this place. For all were connected, and therefore everything was one. Inside this box there was no space. It was eternal, no walls. Inside the box it was like looking inside a galaxy, reminiscent of the Doctor Who TARDIS. The walls and floor did not exist once I looked inside this box. But there was no galaxy inside this box. Instead, it was videos of every single thing I had ever done whilst on Earth. Every action I had done. Each of these videos, just like little television screens, were inside energetic bubbles. All of the bubbles were the same size, with the same energy emitting from them. It appeared like each bubble had its own aura of energy, and that the energy was the bubble. And then the bubble was also the screen in which I was watching a replay of a memory of my life. As I looked inside the box and saw memories from Lynda's years on Earth, I saw Lynda as a baby, as a toddler, as a school student, and as an adult. I saw her married to her first husband. I saw her traveling to America, where she married her second husband. All of Lynda's life and memories were inside this box. Millions and millions, perhaps even billions, of videos of each instance and each event that created memories. Each video was floating inside its very own bubble. I was then directed by the big three that I could pick one out and watch the memory whilst I held it in the palm of my hand. Again, there were no voices, just a clear conscious awareness of what I had to do. But I didn't know at the time what I needed to do, so this direction or request was obviously from them. Just like little bubbles, but with a video playing inside them. That is what Lynda's memories looked like. The first memory that I picked out of this box with no walls was of Lynda when she was about 5 years old. Lynda was at her grandmother's house, and she was playing with her grandmother's white cat. As this memory attached itself to my palm, I was instantly now Lynda, reliving this memory. It felt to me like this memory had melded or melted, and then we were fused together, collectively as one. I instantly remembered, as a memory, that I had grabbed the cat's tail. This memory of the cat was my first memory that I had to relive and then evaluate within myself as to why Lynda did that action. I looked at the cat, remembering from my young years how gorgeous this cat was. I felt an overwhelming sensation of compassion, gratitude, appreciation, and love for this cat. And whilst I stood in this heavenly place, being observed by the big three, I watched the memory from an outsider's perspective. I saw a replay of this event, which probably only took 5 to 10 seconds, and I saw Lynda and the cat both sitting on the ground in her grandmother's front yard. So, I was external to this memory at this point. However, in an instant transformation, I was now back to being myself at the time of being a 5-year-old. I looked over at the cat and saw him come sitting next to me. I was there, but I was not there. I had no ability to change the proceedings of this event, and I had no way of notifying my younger self that I was there, being a part of this memory. And then, I pulled the cat's tail. I felt the intention that I had, and how I thought I wanted to pull the cat's tail. I felt that there was no malice in this event. There was no intention of harm at all. In fact, as a 5-year-old, I felt giggly and happy, wanting to pull its tail. So, firstly, I had to be me and experience this event. I had to go through the cognitive thought process of how I made up my mind to do this action. And then, I had to look at why I actually did it. What benefit was there to gain from this action? What was the consequence I was expecting from this action? All without judgment, for they had said not to judge. Instantly, I was filled with the happiness of being a 5-year-old, sitting in the sun on the grass in my grandmother's front yard. Instantly, I felt how much I loved this cat, and it was tenfold. As soon as I recognized the emotion of how I felt, it overcame me, like a truck bursting through, like a waterfall. I did not have to judge what I did back then, as a child. I had to learn how to act in a more loving and compassionate manner. I had to acknowledge what intention I had for every single action I had ever done whilst living the life of Lynda, and evaluate if I had been living my life in accordance with universal energies. It was an instant knowing that I did not have to judge myself for every action I did on earth, but more so, to forgive and to heal those energetic pulses of negativity that spiked in my life's energy. I had to feel every pain, every disappointment, and every resentment that I had ever caused someone else to feel, in order for me to forgive, heal, and to release all the energy back to where it was from, and to realign the universal energies back to positive love. So, for example, if I had ever yelled at another person, I had to relive that memory, but from their perspective. I had to live, feel, and breathe the emotions that I had caused in the people around me. If I had been good to someone, I would feel that gratitude or love that that person felt. There was an amazing part to this. Not only do you feel the negative, you also feel the positive. I had to be accountable for my intentions toward others. And as I went through the good things that I had done whilst in the life of Lynda, I felt it all, tenfold. So, after I heard the big one say, "You are not here to judge," I had this epiphany, realizing what it was that I was now obliged to do whilst in this review of the Lynda life. It was at this point that I saw the memory of Lynda with the cat, and proceeded to obtain the memory to evaluate what Lynda had caused in that experience. So, in this instance with the cat, there was a clear process involved in dealing with this memory, which went like this. 1. I had to have the intention of which memory I would live again, and to watch it now in this space as an observer to that experience. 2. I had to then be Lynda, to evaluate what it was that Lynda was thinking at that specific time. Was she happy? Was she sad? Did she have any negative intent that caused the physical action to occur? 3. I had to feel that pain or happiness as it was tenfold. 4. I then had to realize what emotion had caused that action. 5. Then, I was the other being involved. I became the cat. I felt what Lynda had done to me. 6. I had to then account for how that being, the cat, felt after they received my energy at that time. 7. I had to fix the issue to resolve any pains or hurt within me whereby I would not do that behavior again in the future to anyone else. In this instance, I had to learn how my emotions and intentions affected the other being, which was the cat. I had to realize what my intentions caused as a ripple effect of energy onto others. 8. I had to forgive myself for doing this action to the cat, and by doing this, I could heal the experience within myself and any other being involved. 9. I had to release that experience and return that emotion to the universe from which it came. So, this first memory that I plucked out of the box, which wasn't a box, pertained to me pulling the cat's tail. It was not a good experience for me at all. There was no way to escape the process of seeing this event from my own perspective, and then the perspective of the cat. I remember feeling happy that day in my youth, playing as a child in the front yard of my grandmother's house. And then I had to relive the joy of sitting there with the cat. And as I said, it was tenfold. My happiness was amplified. The joy came out of me in a ripple of delight, emitting from me. Total tears of joy ran down my face as I relived this happy time of my childhood. And the tears kept coming, good tears of joy, as I thought about playing with this cat. And then, pulling its tail. There was no memory, for it was happening now in the present. For me, standing in this place in front of the big three. But then, it was instant. And I was now the cat, on the receiving end of the action. Instantly, I felt the pain that I had caused the cat. Now that I was the cat, being in the perspective of the cat, total confusion came over me. Almost like thinking, what did you do that for? I thought you liked me. That sort of confusion. And then, I felt the pain of what the cat had felt. It started in my tail, where the human hand gripped my tail to squeeze it. Then, as the human pulled their hand away, pulling my tail, I felt that agonizing pain surge through my tail into my spine. And it was tenfold. My tears of joy were now replaced with tears of pain, agonizing pain. The worst pain I had ever felt. It came out of me like electricity. It was horrible, terrible, excruciatingly traumatic, and I had caused that. And then, I was crying uncontrollably from the pain that this human had caused me. I had to evaluate this event, standing in front of the big three. I had to assess what I had done. I had to come to a solution to fix this problem. And I knew, instantly, that I never wanted to hurt someone or something like that ever again. The tears ran down my face, yet I did not want a tissue to wipe them away. It was a process. I had to allow it, and I had to learn from it. I stood there, thinking about what I had done, working out why I would do that to the cat. And it was probably a good 5 minutes of me having this epiphany, realizing that I did not want to cause that to another being ever again. I was still crying uncontrollably. And as the tears ran down my face, they were not collecting in a puddle on the floor. Believe me, it was like they were just dissolving as they fell to the floor. How do I forgive me, as the cat, for what happened that day? I did not need to, for it was myself who I needed to forgive. I had to learn here that I was only doing what I thought was all right, at the time. And I had no way of knowing that the consequence of that action would have such an impact on the animal I inflicted it on. I had to look at my own life as it had been when I was a young child, and to realize that this child was doing something that they did not know was wrong. So, in that realization, I understood. The young Lynda was only doing what the young mind thought was right and good. There was no punishment or judgment associated with this action. And for that time, as being the young Lynda did not know it was wrong. Identifying something as being wrong can only come from wisdom and learning experiences. Learning what is right from wrong, evaluating each instance of energy or emotion that we emit to others, and then questioning if we actually knew that it was right or wrong. I had to tell myself that I was only doing what I thought best at the time, as the young Lynda. I had to reiterate within myself, to the core of me, that this action was a learning experience. I had to learn that this action was something that I did not want to do again in my life. And I did not want to cause that emotion again to any other person. And as I came to that understanding of the experience, I had to let this memory go. It was like a cleansing of that memory. I just allowed that memory to exist in its entirety, yet universally balanced. I could now release that memory. For now, I realized that this memory was nothing more than an energetic representation of my physical being in that time. Yes, it was energy, for it was the emotion that was the result of this action. Every action we do, regardless of its size or duration, is all connected to emotion, and emotion is energy. So once I had forgiven myself, this energy of what had happened, me pulling the cat's tail, I remembered what the big three had said. You are not here to judge. I was not being shown this memory to judge it. I was being shown this memory to heal it. By forgiving myself for what I had done to the cat, I had healed that energetic pulse in that eternal wave of energy. Not all the memories that I went through were good ones. I looked inside that box that wasn't a box and observed all of Lynda's memories. Some of them were from her years in her 20s, and some were from her 30s. I honestly do not know how many memories I went through, but to call it thousands would be a close estimate. Yet, I was in this huge cathedral, being overseen by the big three, processing thousands of Lynda's life memories. One memory that I saw inside the box was when Lynda was about 16 years old. She was standing next to another girl at school. The memory of this event, so you understand, is that Lynda had a crush on a boy at school who was very popular. He had a lot of admirers, and he was always going with a new girl every week or two. In this memory, the 16-year-old Lynda was telling another girl that she liked him. And this girl started telling Lynda gossip that she had heard about him, how he used girls to get his way, and that he was only after one thing. Lynda did not like the way that this girl was talking about him, and the two girls started an argument about him, resulting in Lynda punching this girl straight across the face. She fell to the ground and didn't get up for a few minutes. I relived this memory as both experiences, as myself, Lynda, and also as the girl who was hit. I could feel the pain as I fell to the ground. To heal this memory, I had to fathom the emotional attachment of both of these girls, to recognize their true intentions, and to identify that both of these girls only wanted the best for themselves. I realized in that instant that the 16-year-old Lynda did in fact learn a valuable lesson that day. She learned not to use violence, to not be the aggressive person she demonstrated in this memory. And in the moment of realization that the 16-year-old Lynda had learned a lesson that day, it was easy to forgive her for learning from her mistakes so she wouldn't do the action again in the future. Through that forgiveness came a healing. And as I healed and the releasing took place, I could feel how this action towards the other girl had been corrected in the universal energies. The memory inside my bubble, floating in my palm, simply disappeared. Lynda continues to document a few more memories that she healed while she stood in front of the three beings. She concludes, "This whole process of my life review was to heal what I had done in the past. So when I entered the space that most call heaven, I was cleansed, refreshed, and ready to accept what heaven represents. For I was a part of that intricate consciousness of that space. I also knew that there was no time limit on how long I wanted to process each memory. The longer I took, the more chance of a total healing from that one memory. For the life review is not heaven. It is almost like the pre-flight checks prior to a plane taking off, ensuring that once the plane is in the air, it will be a functional operating system within the altitude, melding, joining, and being a part of the air that exists up there. Start in continuum of this death experience, my time up there was not yet done. For again, I found myself in that fog. I had no idea where I was, for I had no memory of this place. Yet, the familiarity, just like that cathedral building, I knew it was just a part of me. I looked out into the whiteness of this area, trying to determine the size of this space. There were no shades or shadows, no objects or other matter that would show a sign of where I was in this space at this moment. Everything was white. Then, I saw her. She was far away, standing before me. She was tiny, as if in the distance. Then, as she noticed me, she started walking towards me, in a rushed sort of walk. She was walking through this space, and as she walked closer, I observed she was walking on nothing. There was no floor below her feet. She was walking on nothing. She had legs. I saw her dress, which was a simple brown dress, but it was not the color brown that we have on Earth. So, I say brown, only because brown is the closest color to the amazing color spectrum that exists in this dimensional plane. Her dress gathered at the waist and fell to her knees. Her legs were thinner than mine, and she wore simple brown sandals that matched her dress. She had long brown hair, which reminded me of my own colored hair. I observed no jewelry on this woman, and no other decorative item adorned her. As she came closer to me, I had the opportunity to really look at her. And as she walked towards me, she spoke. "What are you doing here?" She spotted me. She didn't say it like a question, more of an accusation, an abusive and sarcastic statement, rather than a question. Her mouth moved, just like here on Earth when we speak. There was no telepathic communication here at all. I saw her mouth move, and I heard, with my ears, as the volume of her words came out of her mouth. Her lips moved to the letters of the words she was saying. This was the first time, whilst having this experience, that I had come across any form of negative emotion. It sort of took me back a few steps, with how prominent she was. This woman was not happy. She was downright angry and confused as to why I was there. She was waving her arms around, and the next thing she said was, "Why are you here? Don't you know you're not supposed to be here yet?" She said this question with definite confusion and frustration. She was obviously very flustered to see me there, like it was not expected. And she was angry that I was there, like I had any decisions in the matter. At this point, she obviously expected me to answer her questions. But I did not know the answer. I was totally confused by the fact that I was now here, where I had just spent about a year or more in that beautiful cathedral, processing my memories. I watched as the frustration on her face subsided, and I could tell that she was calming down. "Look, my name is Karina. "I know you because we are related," she explained. I then asked her why I was there, because I was still as dumbfounded to find myself in this white space with no walls, ceilings, or floor. "It doesn't matter," Karina said, raising her hands and moving her head to the side as if she didn't want to talk to me. "Why am I here? Where am I?" I asked her, and she looked at me with eyes that burned straight through me. I felt instantly, from the look on her face, that I was supposed to know the answer. She then came closer to me, about 2 feet, and said again, "Why are you here?" with emphasis on the why. Instantly, I thought, I was in the wrong place. It was almost like I had gone into a staff-only area of a store. "Why are you here?" I then said to her, "I don't know." "You're not supposed to be here," she said. "You've got to go back and finish it." I said, "Finish what?" And she got even angrier with me at this point. Her hands were starting to wave around again, out of frustration. And she said, in an extremely harsh, almost abusive tone, "Don't you realize why we've shown you all this?" To be honest, I was still trying to fathom how she was walking towards me when there was no floor, walls, or ceiling in this place. And further, how was I standing there when there was nothing below my feet? But she continued to yell at me. And then, I got a bit angry with her also. I started to concentrate more on what she was saying rather than where we both were. I actually acknowledged her question. "You've got to go back and finish it." "Well, okay, why did I get shown all of this then?" I asked her, trying to stay calm. She said something like, "You honestly don't know why you are here." The pitch of her voice rose. Her tone was high. And the why in the middle of the sentence went up a few octaves. I replied, "No." And that was when this conversation got even weirder for me. "You were only here to see what this is like," she said. "You have to go back and tell others what this is like. You are going to have a daughter who is important to you. If you stay here, she will never be born. You are not supposed to be here. You have to go." Wait, what? Go where? A daughter? As I tried to remember what Lynda had experienced, I realized that I had no memories at this point about the life of Lynda and her memories on Earth. The only memories I had were those of the field of flowers and the experiences or memories that I had created whilst I was there. I also remembered going through the fog and arriving at the cathedral, where I stood in front of the big three. But there was nothing before that. It was like I had been born into this place and had grown up in this existence, just like a baby on Earth. Karina then went into great detail about who she was. She explained that she was my great-great-great-great-grandmother. And the weird part was, she knew me, even though I didn't know or recognize her. It is hard to put into words how long she told me about her life when she was alive in the early 1820s. But when I try and calculate it, I would say she spent about 6 months to a year telling me about her life. I guess, in hindsight, she did this to make me understand the situation, where I was now. She wanted me to know the complexity of where I was, and to fathom the vastness of this universe, and how time does not exist where we both were in this white space. She spoke to me in depth about a lot of things, personal things, emotional issues that she had endured in her own lifetime. To give you, the reader, an insight into what she spoke about for 6 months, or maybe a year, here is a short version of the long version. Not only did Karina tell me about the house she lived in, she told me in depth how her husband had built it with his brother, how they cut the timber, how they pulled the timber, how they placed the timber on top of each other, all in depth, how to make an axe. This story was interesting and fascinating, as I never knew the intricate way of balancing the handle to make the axe in order to cut down trees. She told me how to cut down trees, not just any trees, but specific types of wood, which trees were best for furniture, which were best for firewood, which were best for flooring or pathways. She told me how they made clothing, not only how to make the needle, but also how to make the cotton to sew fabric together to form sleeves or legs of a garment. She called it a scrim, whereby she would weave shorter threads together, making stronger threads so that she could use it to reinforce sleeves and around the crotch so clothing held together and would last longer. Lynda goes on to document more instances that her great-great-great-great-grandmother had told her. She asked her about her future as Lynda. You will have to check out her book to read all of this. She said that she detailed an intricate knowledge of what she would be doing in her life once she returned as Lynda. Then, after we had spoken for probably a year or more, she said, "Don't you understand that if you go there, you can never go back?" As she said this, she was pointing behind me. So, I turned around to see what she was pointing at. To be honest, when I first saw the tunnel behind me, I nearly fell over. I had been in this white space for the longest time, and I never realized it was right behind me the whole time. I always wondered why a moth would fly straight into a light, burning itself to death in the heat emitted by the light it was so attracted to. That was exactly how I felt. I was drawn, like a magnet, to this tunnel. I had to physically restrain myself from not going into it. Behind me, in this white space that completely encased everything in white, was a round tunnel. The whiteness of the room faded, not into black, but a very dark color. And the color got darker towards the middle of the tunnel. The tunnel was moving in a circular manner, rotating both left and right at the same time, clockwise and anti-clockwise. And every ounce of my body wanted to go into that tunnel. When I saw it, it was pulling me in with its attraction, causing me to go totally dizzy with excitement at the thought of going into that tunnel and seeing what was on the other side. I cannot explain the pull that this tunnel had, but it was like I could actually just float into the tunnel. It wanted me that much. And believe me, I wanted to go into it. As I looked into this blackened tunnel, I could see far through it. Right at the end was the brightest light I have ever seen. This white light was far brighter than any other light I had ever seen whilst having this experience. However, it did not burn my eyes at all. I had to use everything within me to not go into this tunnel. It was like gravity, pulling me into it. Karina never explained to me what exactly would happen to me if I did enter the tunnel. She never gave any indication of a process, of what I would physically or energetically feel or witness. But she did tell me, if you go in there, you will never be able to return to your Lynda life. Where did this tunnel lead to? What would happen to me if I went in there? Is this what people refer to as reincarnation? Or is this just a tunnel, like the fog, that would transport me to another location or time? These were some of the millions of questions that came into my head when I first saw it. Karina started to explain. This tunnel is not the end. This tunnel is the beginning. She outlined 3 very important things that this tunnel does. It allows us to reincarnate into another living entity. It allows us to allocate our life contract. And it allows us to reevaluate our life lessons and to pick the ones, or one, that we want to learn in our next existence. Does everyone reincarnate? I asked. Simple answer, no. We do have a choice in what we do, and that is part of our own free will to decide for ourselves. However, in saying that, when we do reincarnate, it gives us the opportunity to experience new contracts, with new lessons to be learned in that lifetime. She stated that when we are assigned to a life, we do not pick the year or the family we enter into as an important basis in that decision. She explained that a lot of souls like to be reunited with past relatives or friends. So, therefore, choosing a specific time, like a year, was not an important factor in deciding where to go. I was made aware during this conversation that when we reincarnate, it is more about life lessons, and that continuum of consciousness enabling us to reach higher consciousness or awareness levels. Each life lesson that we pass, like an exam, all goes towards who we ultimately become in that cosmic awareness. Also, we face these lessons blinded, not knowing what even the exam is about. So it is our own intentions, our thoughts, that are a representation of our true self, our true soul self, to see how we deal with those lessons, and whether we truly want to pass them or not. Karina actually did not call it a life contract. She instead used the term awareness agreements. She said that every soul who wishes to reincarnate does get the free will to decide what it is they will do in that existence. She said that we are also assigned guides to help us stay on that path of our life contract. These loving guides can be deceased relatives who want to assist us with staying true to our contract. They could also be angels or other universal entities who are willing to stay with us through our entire contract, keeping us true on course, so we gain access to all those opportunities to better our awareness. Lynda goes on in great detail, explaining life contracts, guardian angels, and deceased relatives who decide to be our guides. She also discusses fate and synchronicities, karma, and a complete section of commonly asked questions. Her book is absolutely fascinating, and I do implore you to read it all. I feel that I have barely touched the surface with Lynda's book. Her experience is the most fascinating one that I have ever read. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this fantastic experience. Right, that's me signing off. If you have enjoyed this material, then please support my channel by subscribing and give me a like on your way out. Thanks again. See you on the next video. Take care.